I made something I'm calling a calendiary. It's not a calendar, it's not a diary, it's a calendiary, or diary tu'u in my conlang. I started working on this like 2 months back, but it's been a long time coming in a sense because at the beginning of this year I started a Patreon, and one of the main things I do there is that I release these tracks called Herbal Detonations, where every 28 days, following the international fixed calendar where we have 13 months of 28 days each, I sit down, I write lyrics that are just very messy and vulnerable and raw and just capture my emotional landscape as authentically as possible. I translate all of that into Erunit, my conlang, and then I make music out of all of this in like an hour or two. Just very quick, very simple, very raw, done and done, no fussing about. And around the same time that I started doing this, I found this runic calendar and I thought it was really nice, so I just saved the image and proceeded to completely forget about it, as I often do. But yeah, then a few months back, I opened the image again and I really liked it, and I noticed that it follows the exact same 13-month system, and that made me go, okay, that's really cool, I want to do something about that. So I literally just copied it. I used my writing system and did the exact same thing. And then I was like, neat, now what? Because yeah, the runic calendar has these symbols on the side and it looks all mystical and magical and all of that. And I liked it, but I didn't want to just add, ornamentation for the sake of ornamentation. I prefer to do things that have meaning and a purpose. So after a bit of thinking, I decided to do a calendar that's about being present with your emotional movements. So no future events, no in 12 days I'm meeting Samantha for whatever. No, Samantha can take a hike. This is just about taking each day as is, tending to your emotional landscape, checking in with yourself and being present. And, at the end of the year, you also end up with a cool artwork, which is really nice because I like connecting utility and art and just making everything, nice and purposeful and all of that. And I think there were two streams of influence for me here. I've been doing a lot of emotional work through therapy, learning how to identify emotions, sit with them, give them a voice, the platform, the time, just generally accept them and give them love and give them exactly what they need without them driving the whole vehicle. So, also not running away from them, but also not running away from yourself. And yeah, it's hard. I'm still learning, but I'm getting there. So that's one thing. And then the second stream of influence was this book called African Religions and Philosophy by John Mbiti that I found out about through an Instagram account called Mumbi Poetry, which I really recommend checking out because it's very nice and there's a lot of interesting stuff there. But in essence, to keep it short, John Mbiti was studying these East African Bantu languages, and in the book he wrote about this concept of African time, where instead of viewing time as a commodity, time is something that you make. You make as much of it as you need through events, through whatever it is that you are doing. It's something that has to be experienced in order to be real because it's rooted in those events. And there's two dimensions to it. There's Sasa, the present time, the recent past and immediate future that can be experienced all together. And then there's Amani, the endless, limitless past where all events eventually go on to live forever. And there's a lot more to it, like for example, time moving backward instead of forward, which makes me think of how certain cultures see time as something that you fall backwards into, and I also really like that because you don't know what's in the future, so it's not in front of you, you cannot see it, so backwards it goes. There's also the idea that a year isn't strictly 365 days. It's just, like you have the 4 seasons, 2 wet and 2 dry seasons, and is as long as all those 4 seasons last. So it can be 365, it can be 390, whatever. In general, however, I'm no authority on this. On no authority on African temporality, African philosophy, or just Africa in general. It's a lot more complex than I can express right now, and there's been enough harm done by uneducated people when it comes to talking about Africa. So I recommend checking out the book, checking out Mumbi Poetry. This is just the part that stuck with me and that inspired me in this particular process. And anyway, I generally like this because I I generally struggle with like the fear of missing out, feeling like I must progress, make use of time, like it's something that I need to spend or save or whatever, but I don't want to do that anymore. So I want to slowly but surely kind of tackle this internalized idea that time is a commodity, that I need to use it to produce things. I don't like this very, I don't know, capitalist way of thinking about it. So yeah. Anyway, I started looking at different emotional models and I figured, okay, I want something that's good for like a general emotional movement, something that can be both more abstract and specific at the same time. And I landed on this modular 3-part system where you have energy, weight, and direction, and you combine the values in each of these however you see fit. So with energy, you're either calm or excited. Either you are feeling serene, things are still in you, or there's some vibration, some tension, some alertness in you. With weight, you have heavy or light, either something that brings you down and kind of grounds you, or something that lifts you up and makes you feel like you're, light. I chose heavy and light and not positive or negative because I feel like those two words do a lot of harm when it comes to identifying emotions. So no, just heavy and light. None of it is positive or negative, it just is. And then finally, there's direction. That's either something that goes inward or outward, something that takes you inside of yourself and makes you think about the interface with yourself and what's happening inside of you, or something that takes you outside and makes you think and reevaluate things that happen on the outside. So if we take anger, for example, inward anger is about reevaluating your self-respect and your inner boundaries. And outward anger is something that makes you reevaluate boundaries with others or makes you look at injustice or some sort of an obstacle that's on the outside. So yeah, I had this. I started calling it emotiongul, kind of in the vein of, Hangul, the Korean alphabet, because yeah, you have a block of 3 characters that you can just fill out, and that just, it just made sense to me. And even though I have a name for it in my conlang, Nahibiuke Chaito, I just keep using emotiongul because it's funny and I like it and it's just better. So yeah. I tested all of this out for a month, that is to say 28 days, and I started with this modular 3-part model at first, and it was cool. I really enjoyed myself, but I could see that something was missing. And yeah, I figured, okay, I want to add some core emotions because sometimes you do want to be specific with that as well. So after a bit more digging and looking through different models of mapping out emotions, I landed on a set of 12, and I thought, that's enough, but since I have 13 months, it would just be nicer if I had 13 emotions as well. So a bit more digging, and yeah, I landed on 13. I also figured I'd construct the shapes or the symbols for these emotions out of the symbols I use in the modular system. So I thought, okay, for example, grief is heavy, calm, and either inward or outward going. So I included all of the shapes in the symbol and kind of, made sure it looked nice. And yeah, I just really like what it looks like. And aside from these core emotions, I also started using accents because I figured, I need some nuance. I need a way to modify the other 2 systems, but also maybe something that lets me, express uncertainty or closure or something that is kind of outside of emotion, something that's kind of like a meta emotion in a certain sense. I'll explain that later. I based these accents on the punctuation marks I use in my writing system, so yeah, that's also pretty neat. Either way, I really enjoyed myself. I was quite sad at the end of this 28-day period because I was like, oh man, now I don't get to use it for a bit. But yeah, I started recreating all of this digitally. I wanted to make it look all nice and just, like zhuzhed up and all of that. And, I added a legend. I made sure that the spacing was exactly what it needed to be for you to be able to slot in all of the symbols. And then I started adding test symbols because I wanted to see what it would look like. And oh boy, it looked really nice. I was really, really happy about it. And so I figured the next step is to just do a test print on an A4, just to take one column, maybe, do different sizes and see how it is, because I needed to figure out, okay, what size do I need in order to comfortably write everything in. So yeah, doing this helped me figure out that it needs to be at least 96 by 40 centimeters to make sure that when you write stuff, you have enough space and it's not, something that you have to really be super careful about. And that's pretty big. So I wanted to find a way to make it a bit less unwieldy because, yeah, sure, you can put it on a wall or something, but not everyone wants to or can do that. And so I just added, I had these 14 columns, 13 for the months, and then this thing on the right that I'm going to explain later. And in order to make it look all nice, I just added one extra column / panel on the left to make it 15 so that you could either fold it into thirds, fifths, or do some sort of an accordion situation, whatever floats your goat, really. I added separators to make it easy to fold alongside those and to help with connecting days. And overall, yeah, it looked really nice and it was nice and usable. So then I just had to figure out the weight of the paper, which I did by bending a tiny corner in an art book I have. Lord have mercy on me. I am not happy about it, but I didn't have anything else to test it with. So yeah, but it helped. And yeah, I got exactly what I needed. So I did a test print of the calendar with all of the test symbols. And it looked amazing. I was so stoked. I kept looking at it. It looked magical and mystical and just wonderful. And so I decided, okay, I want to do prints of the calendar without all the symbols so that I can use it and so that I can also give, these calendaries to people close to me as gifts. And yeah, I cannot wait to start using it, like I said. So really, really excited about that. But altogether, the way it works is that, yeah, you have these 13 columns, 28 days each in groups of 7. The 7 letters are M, Ev, I, E, R, K, N in my writing system, which is also the beginning of the alphabet and also the root word for anything that has to do with change, which is why the calendiary is called vieraitū. It literally just means changes, like emotional changes. So yeah, in the morning, you wake up, you do what you need to do, and then you sit down and you jot down how you feel. Then maybe something changes or happens during the day, so you also note that down. And then before bed, before the day comes to a close, you do the exact same thing, and that's it. The way in which you note your emotional state is that, yeah, you use the 3-part model, the core emotions, and then the accents: closure, uncertainty, absence, and presence. A little note here on the accents. Closure is something that asks or answers the question, has this emotional process reached its natural point of completion? It's not about whether you're fine with it or whether you've understood it all. It's just about whether it's come to a close. Uncertainty is literally just whether what you're feeling is something that is clear to you or something that you're just not sure of, or if it's used on its own, whether you feel uncertainty or not. Absence is something that was part of the system that is no longer there. So maybe one day you might feel joy and then something happens, and it's not that you feel sadness or grief or whatever, but you feel the lack of joy. It can also be overall absence, perhaps, numbness to your emotional world. And then finally, presence is just about whether the self stays with the process or whether it fragments or abandons something in you, regardless of intensity, direction, energy, or anything else. A little insert here, because I forgot to mention this in the original recording, but you can also combine the core emotions to form new emotions. So, for instance, you take fear and anticipation and you can get anxiety. Overall, you can just combine everything with everything and create whatever feels right, whatever represents and expresses whatever is happening inside of you. So yeah. So you use these 3 systems in a way that feels right. Again, it's all about feeling anyway. And yeah, you can also connect days however they make sense to you, because maybe something happened the week before and you woke up, you started thinking about it, it affected your mood, so it would make sense to connect them and to kind of like visualize the connection. So yeah, that's also really neat. So you do all of this throughout the year, and then at the very end, on what's called the year day in the International Fixed Calendar System, you do a bit of a summary for yourself. So the overall imprint that the year has had on you, what you're leaving the year with. Then whether there have been any recurring patterns or movements or feelings, just things that kept coming back and that you really feel have stuck with you in a certain sense. And then also what you started out the year with, kind of like the emotional base that you entered into the year with. And yeah, then, like I said, you have a very cool artwork. And then if you keep doing that throughout the years, you can have like this flip book of just beautiful, mystical, magical looking, calendaries. As for what's next, well, I'm going to be doing this in 2026, and I'm really looking forward to that, like I said. And right now, it's mostly a proof of concept. I didn't want to get stuck on tinkering with it or perfecting it. Like, it can just be imperfect and a bit shabby and a bit, a bit flawed right now. So that's fine. I'm sure I'm going to find some areas for improvement. Maybe, in terms of the system, it could be nice to have something for transitional forms for things that are in motion. Maybe something like resonance structures in chemistry, where you have a set of two or more parts that collectively describe a dynamic system. And on the UX side of it, all maybe like, better paper or more spacing or a different size. I don't know yet, but I'm sure I'm going to figure it out. One other thing that this sparked for me is the idea of constructing an emotional equivalent to a conlang. Because, conlangs or natural languages in general, they convey meaning and they mediate communication and an exchange of ideas. But going inward and focusing on your emotions, how does that work? I have no clue, but I would like to figure it out because I think it would be quite nice, and it would be like a nice counterpart to my constructed language. Kind of like, you have rationality and being emotional, and they're a spectrum. So you kind of need to, you're always somewhere in between. So I would like to find, the other side of this spectrum in terms of conlangs and figure out how you can communicate with yourself in a way that's kind of the most U-y way of doing that, the most U-shaped way of doing that. It's not about, or at least I imagine it's not about being efficient or effective. It's just about finding what works for you. So sure, maybe there can be some general principles or pillars that can be applicable to other people, but the actual language itself is something that only works in you. And maybe it's not at all about, using words or verbalizing anything. I'm definitely a verbal processor when it comes to this, and I'm slowly learning to just feel things. So maybe that's also a part of it, where it's not a language in the sense of having, words and phrases and all of that, but maybe something that comprises actions and stances and attitudes and approaches to your emotional landscape. So I don't know yet. I just think it would be cool to find a way to express this sort of continuity in yourself and speaking to yourself instead of speaking to someone else. But we'll see how that goes. For now, I just have the calendiary. I'm happy about it. I'm really, really happy about it, and I cannot wait to start using it. So that's pretty much it. I'm excited. Wee.